underlying a lot of the discussion around skills development is, I think, a lot of fears about how the demand is going to change as a result of globalization.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've definitely seen a major shift just within the last 5 to 10 years in terms of people looking at lower cost centers to do some of this work. And I think the myth there, or the perception there, is that if you really want to succeed in IT, maybe Canada isn't where you're going to want to stay, and that it's going to be a requirement. I have a letter that we got from a reader from somebody in Toronto that said, "It's a little hard to advise my university-age kids to pursue IT when it's my job to transition as much programming work as possible to third-world technical folks by advising them on how to make modifications wisely and support the system. I don't share the future is so bright outlook. All the major companies, save Microsoft and a couple of others, share a utility view of IT and are outsourcing offshore. It's only a matter of time before the quality of this work improves to the point where there are only a bare minimum of technical North American employees are required. Only the strong, or the BS artists, will survive."
I think the reality of some aspects of globalization, I think we need to sort of separate a couple of trends here. Globalization of things like call centers, other sort of support vehicles, data center consolidation, these kinds of things, certainly is a reality. But I think, like other industries, there are ways where, as a group, as a profession, we can show that the return on investment in investing in Canada can be higher than in other geographies, and that's where we come to the examples that this is really a Canadian issue more than it is an IT industry issue. That we need to say, are we innovating? Are we driving the right kind of talent that make people want to invest in Canada? To make IT what we call, the software economy in Canada, one that is vibrant enough. And, in these times where we look for alternates to other industries that may be having problems and where we can find places for investment, our technology route's the way to go to help bolster Canada's broader economy. My team, in addition to building the relationship with the IT professionals in Canada, also works on helping people with strategic platform adoption, really thinking about what's next, right? So what does the cloud truly mean, and how do we innovate around it? What do these web technologies and user experience technologies mean to how we innovate? So we work on that, and we work with both the private and public sector on basically nurturing Canadian innovation, and that includes what students are doing in entrepreneurism and startups and the venture community and other Canadian software companies. As you know, Microsoft is a company that believes deeply in our partner ecosystem. We have a huge halo of partners around us that is pretty important to us, that those partners stay as profitable and viable as possible. And as a Microsoft Canada guy, it's important to me that those companies are Canadian, and that they have headquarters here, that they have development centers here, that they have data centers here. I think the reality comes in that, take the cloud as an example.
Okay.
There's a number of regulatory reasons, privacy, security, Sarbanes-Oxley in the US as an example, and other regulatory issues about why a data center needs to stay in country. So I think, while one trend of a few years ago to offshore talent for raw cost savings will be offset by a counter trend that says we need to inshore those technology. Let's take the data center and the cloud example, because we need to keep private personal data within Canadian borders, and we actually need to architect software and the hardware that supports it to keep that contained as a privacy regulation. There's a great example where somebody's going to have to start building data centers in Canada to meet those requirements. And the laws are sort of driving a lot of the data center vendors to that conclusion. And you see it across the industry. You will see things like the connection back to business. We talked a lot of, so far about those business skills. Well, those business skills are important because you got to connect with the business. You're still going to have, I think, very strategic, great paying, very important jobs to an organization located in the major centers of that organization, the headquarters or major branch offices of that organization, because they need to collaborate. They are part of the business decision process. They're not just some commodity that can get severed off and pushed out to another geography or handed off to another business. That, I don't think that's going to be a reality going forward. And then when you connect, I think, how software will get built, how IT will get architected in the future, there will be this interesting connection between what runs locally and what runs in the cloud or off premise. We're going to end up in a hybrid situation. I think as companies have tried to do that data, pushing some of those functions of IT elsewhere, they have discovered that what they gain is offset sometimes by what they've lost in terms of agility, in terms of time to market and speed. And so they want to now start actually bringing some of those technologies back. In fact, what they look for is a bit of harmony between what I run, which is perhaps the very strategic and I think for the IT professional, the higher paying, more connected to the business roles, versus what can truly be utility. And we're going to need people that know how to make that hybrid model work. And those may be some of the jobs of the future. And I think the supply side of this labor equation perhaps needs to recognize that. And we're trying to help train that, Canada's IT workforce. I think the reality might be less about, hey, don't go into IT because all the jobs are going away. The reality might be, go into IT because the jobs are going to change and they're going to become more important.
I know Microsoft does a lot, but there's, obviously there's only so much Microsoft can do. I'm interested in what maybe your thoughts are on what some of the other stakeholders in this industry need to do. If you look at every once a year or so, you'll see these annual surveys about kind of centers of innovation in IT around the world. Yeah. Canada's rank is dropping. The venture capital community in Canada, never great for IT. I've heard people now say it's worse than ever, just given the current economic situation. We have kind of the stars of the Canadian IT economy, like Nortel, that are experiencing major financial hardships. And at least once a year, someone says, "How come we don't have more research in motions?" Popping up in Canada. What else do you think we need to do, kind of as an industry, to galvanize the country sector and make this country an environment that more people will want to be a part of the sector?
I think there's a few things that we're trying to do and that we see others working on. Like you said, Microsoft's certainly not alone in some of this effort. In fact, I think it's one of those times where sometimes competitors rally together for a greater cause, and I think we certainly see that happening in Canada right now for some of the exact reasons that you mentioned. The one is, I think, ensuring that we have the best trained people in the world. I mean, that it has to start there. I mentioned the ACCC, the Association of Community Colleges. We're doing a lot of work with them on how curriculum is built in school, about what people are getting trained for, about what they are being prepared for. We have similar kinds of arrangements with organizations like the University of Waterloo, where we spend a lot of time both on curriculum and ensuring students are ready for the future, but we also collaborate with them quite a bit on where technology can go to try and generate. I mean, you mentioned our friends at Research in Motion. That started with an idea from a few people, an entrepreneurial idea that grew into a very large and successful organization, one that I think with all of our Canadian hats on, we should, people should be very proud of. Given I mentioned our partner focus, that's exactly what we want. We want the next Research in Motion. We want the next, Canadian superstar to happen. And I think the reality is while, and I'll talk in a second about, the industry has to be, I think, set up for success to make those success stories happen. It does always start with a set of people with the right ideas, the right connection to business, and the right connection to the technical skills. It always starts there. Assuming you have that in place, I think some of the work in Canada that's been done on growing clusters of innovation absolutely needs to continue. We've seen that in Waterloo. We've seen that in Ottawa, although in Ottawa it has been hampered by some of the current conditions. We see it in Toronto to a certain degree, although there's also similar clusters for things like biotechnologies and others in Toronto. You see it in Montreal and Vancouver with the gaming industry and all the design shops and the other kinds of firms that sort of orbit the gaming industry. So we know it can happen in Canada. I think Montreal was a great example of the combination of, and they did a very interesting thing. They attracted the people first. They had a set of very interesting programs to bring the best and brightest of the gaming industry to Montreal, to sell them on Montreal. They started with the people. Then they sold the companies on coming to Montreal and setting up because of the cluster of talent that was going to be there and the pool that they could draw from. And then they sold the halo of companies around the major publishers, the supporting organizations that the business was going to be there for them. They went so far as to set aside space in Old Montreal and other parts of the city to make it a vibrant place. I think that's a model you could repeat in other parts of Canada. Shouldn't always be video games. We should diversify around technology. But they've proven it can happen, and it was a great thing, and continues to be a great thing even despite current economic situation. So it absolutely can happen. If you look at more of the established companies, I think because some people may say, "Great, I'm not a startup. I'm not 19 in university. What am I supposed to do?" Well, I think it's the understanding that the day-to-day job that you're doing now is going to get more complex, and how are you preparing for that change? But also that there are support mechanisms, say for existing software companies and IT services organizations, to think about, can Canada move faster than the rest of the industry on some of these trends that we could be? Why can't Canada be the center of cloud computing for all of the world? There are no reasons why we couldn't do that. I think collectively, if we really wanted to work together, we would have the talent. I think we'd have the public and private sector support, and we would get those superstars coming out the other end with cloud or wireless or user experience, software design, whatever the case is going to be. Canada, I think, should put a stake in the ground and decide that we're going to be the center of the technology universe for some of those industries, and I think it's only through that kind of focus that we'll see those superstars come out the other end.